Chapter 9. Has your vocation your unqualified approval? I quote the following sentences from a letter just received. In your February editorial, the following paragraph has impressed me mightily. To spend a life in buying and selling lies, or cheap, shoddy shams, is demoralizing to every element of nobility, to excellence in any form. Now, I happen to be in the sham business and hate it so heartily that I want to get out of it as soon as I can do so with justice to others' interests. This young man, who gets more than $10,000 a year in salary, says that he is expected to trade upon the credulity of the poorer classes who can ill afford to be preyed upon, and he continues, while I need the money, I cannot enjoy this kind of work, nor can I write with conviction or ambition on projects which I naturally know to be fakes. Besides, I am afraid of the very thing pointed out in your editorial, namely, growing down to the work. I hate hypocrisy worse than any other thing, and I cannot do my best work in any business based on such a foundation. I do not want to remain in an occupation which pays its highest salaries to the most skillful fakirs. It is pitiable to see a strong, bright, promising young man, capable of filling a high position, trying to support himself and his family in an occupation which has not received his approval, which is lowering his ideals, which dwarfs his nature, which makes him despise himself, which strangles all that is best and noblest within him, and which is constantly condemning him and ostracizing him and his family from all that is best and truest in life. How often we hear a young man say, I do not like the business I am in. I know it has a bad influence on me. I do not believe in the methods used or the deceptions practiced. I am ashamed to have my friends know what I am doing, and I say as little about it in public as possible. I know I ought to change, but it is the only business I understand in which I can earn as much money as I need to keep up appearances, for I have been getting a good salary and have contracted expensive habits of living, and I have not the force of character to risk a change. Do not deceive yourself with the idea that somebody has got to do this questionable work, and that it might as well be you. Let other people do it, if they will. There is something better for you. The Creator has given you a guarantee, written in your blood and brain cells, that if you keep yourself clean and do that which He has indicated in your very constitution, you will be a man, will succeed, and will belong to the order of true nobility. But if you do not heed that edict, you will fail. You may get a large salary, but this alone is not success. If the almighty dollar is dragging its slimy trail all through your career, if money-making has become your one unwavering aim, you have failed, no matter how much you have accumulated. If your money smells of the blood of the innocent, if there is a dirty dollar in it, if there is a taint of avarice in it, if envy and greed have helped in its accumulation, if there is a sacrifice of the rights and comforts of others in it, if there is a stain of dishonor on your stocks and bonds, or if a smirched character looms up in your pile, do not boast of your success, for you have failed. Making money by dirty work is bad business. Gild it how we will. There are 1,000 indications in you that the Creator did not fit you for what is wrong, but only for the right. Do the right, and all nature, all law, and all science will help you, because the attainment of rectitude is the plan of the universe. It is the very nature of things. Reverse it, and all these forces are pledged to defeat you. To the young men who have written for advice, let me say that if you are making money by forcing yourself by sheer willpower to do what you loathe, what does not engage your whole heart, or that into which you cannot fling your entire being, because you fear that it is not quite right, you can do 1,000 times better in an occupation which has your unreserved, unqualified consent. If you refuse to smirch your ability, no matter what the reward, you will thereby increase your success power 1,000-fold. The very fact that you can come out of a questionable situation boldly and take a stand for the right, regardless of consequences, will help you immeasurably. The greater self-respect, increased self-confidence, and the tonic influence which will come from the sense of victory will give you the air of a conqueror instead of that of one conquered. Nobody ever loses anything by standing for the right with decision, with firmness, and with vigor. You have a compass within you, the needle of which points more surely to the right and to the true than the needle of the mariner points to the pole star. If you do not follow it, you are in perpetual danger of going to pieces on the rocks. Your conscience is your compass, given you when you were launched upon life's high seas. It is the only guide that is sure to take you safely into the harbor of true success. What if a mariner should refuse to steer by the pointing of his compass, declaring it to be all nonsense that the needle should always point north, and should pull it around so that it would point in some other direction, fasten it there, and then sail by it? He would never reach port in safety. It takes only a little influence, just a little force, to pull the needle away from its natural pointing. Your conscience compass must not be influenced by greed or expediency. You must not trammel it. You must leave it free. The man who tampers with the needle of his conscience, who pulls it away from its natural love, and who tries to convince himself that there are other standards of right, other stars as reliable as the pole star of his character, and proposes to follow them in some questionable business, is a deluded fool who invites disaster. Every little while I meet young men who dislike to tell me what their vocation is. They seem ashamed of what they are doing. One young man I met some time ago very reluctantly told me that he was a bartender in a large saloon. I asked him how long he had been there, and he said about 6 years. He said he hated the business. It was degrading, but that he was making pretty good money, and just as soon as he could get enough laid up so that he could afford it, he was going to quit and go into something else. Now, this young man had been deceiving himself for years by thinking that he was doing pretty well, and that he would soon leave the business. There is something very demoralizing to the whole nature in doing that against which the better self protests. An effort to reconcile the ideal with that which we cannot respect is fatal to all growth. This is the reason why men shrivel and shrink instead of expanding when they are out of place. A man does not grow when a large part of him is entering its protest against his work. A volunteer makes a better soldier than a drafted man. A great many young men try to justify themselves and check inward protests by the perpetual self-suggestion that it is better to keep on, for the present, in questionable occupations, because the great financial reward will put them in position to do better later. This is a sort of sedative to the conscience to keep it quiet until they can afford to listen to it. Do not deceive yourself by the expectation of making clean money in a dirty occupation. Do not deceive yourself either by thinking that you can elevate a bad business or make it respectable. Many a man has been thus dragged down to his ruin. Some occupations are so demoralizing, brutalizing, and hardening that even a Lincoln could not make them respectable. If what you are doing is wrong, stop it. Have nothing to do with it. If you are in doubt, or if you suspect that you are warping your conscience, give yourself the benefit of the doubt. Take no chances with it. Leave it before it is too late. Long familiarity with a bad business will make it seem right to you. If it is very profitable, it will at last hush your doubts and blunt your moral faculties. It will make you feel that there is compensation in pursuing it, at least until capital is accumulated for something else. Besides, the philosophy of habit is that every repetition of an act makes it more certain that it will be repeated again and again, quickly making the doer a slave. In spite of the protests of your weakened will, the trained nerves continue to repeat the acts even when you abhor them. What you at first choose at last compels you. You are as irrevocably chained to your deeds as the atoms are chained by gravitation. So, my friends, when you are thinking of engaging in an occupation which is a little questionable and which does not get the complete consent of your faculties, do not forget this tremendous gripping power of habit, which, when you may wish to change, will pull like a giant to get you back into the old rut. You have no right to choose an occupation which calls into play your inferior qualities, the lying, cunning, overreaching, scheming, long-headed, underhanded qualities, those which covet and grasp and snatch and never give, while all that is noblest in you shrivels and dies. If you have already made a wrong choice, why should you remain in an occupation which does not have your unqualified approval, or in one of which you are ashamed, and in which you have to stretch your conscience every day to make deceitful statements and false representations to influence purchasers unduly, to induce them by a smooth manner and a lying tongue to do that which you know is not for their advantage and for which you will reproach yourself afterwards? Why should you desecrate your manhood and pervert your ability in a contemptible occupation when there are so many clean, respectable vocations which are searching for your ability and hunting for your talent? You say that it is hard for you to change. Of course, it is hard to jog along in humdrum toil for the sake of being honest when acquaintances all around are getting rich by leaps and bounds. Of course, it takes courage to refuse to bend the knee to questionable methods, lies, schemes, and fraud when they are so generally used. Of course, it takes courage to tell the exact truth when a little deception or a little departure from the right would bring great temporary gain. Of course, it takes courage to refuse to be bribed when it could be covered up by a little specious mystification. Of course, it takes courage to stand erect when by bowing and scraping to people with a pull, you can get inside information which will make you win what you know others must lose. Of course, it takes courage to determine never to put into your pocket a dirty dollar, a lying, deceitful dollar, a dollar that drips with human sorrow, or a dollar that has made some poor gullible wretch poorer, or has defeated another's cherished plans, or robbed him of ambition or education. But this is what character is for. This is what manhood means. This is what backbone and stamina were given us for. To stand for the right and oppose the wrong, no matter what the results. Wear threadbare clothes, if necessary. Live on one meal a day in a house with bare floors and bare walls, if you must, but under no circumstances ever consent to prostitute your manhood, or to turn your ability to do an unclean thing. Dig trenches, carry a hod, work as a section hand on a railroad, shovel coal, anything rather than sacrifice your self-respect, blunt your sense of right and wrong, and shut yourself off forever from the true joy of living and the approbation which comes only from the consciousness of doing your level best to reach the highest that is possible to you. Do not choose that occupation which has the most money in it, the greatest promise of material reward, notoriety, or fame even, but choose that which will call out the man in you and which will develop your greatest strength and symmetry of manhood, personal nobility. Manhood is greater than wealth and grander than fame. Personal nobility is greater than any calling or any reward that it can bring. Chapter 10. Stand for something. The greatest thing that can be said of a man, no matter how much he has achieved, is that he has kept his record clean. Why is it that, in spite of the ravages of time, the reputation of Lincoln grows larger and his character means more to the world every year? It is because he kept his record clean and never prostituted his ability nor gambled with his reputation. Where, in all history, is there an example of a man who was merely rich, no matter how great his wealth, who exerted such a power for good, who was such a living force in civilization, as was this poor backwoods boy? What a powerful illustration of the fact that character is the greatest force in the world. A man assumes importance and becomes a power in the world just as soon as it is found that he stands for something, that he is not for sale, that he will not lease his manhood for salary, for any amount of money, or for any influence or position, that he will not lend his name to anything which he cannot endorse. The trouble with so many men today is that they do not stand for anything outside their vocation. They may be well educated, well up in their specialties, may have a lot of expert knowledge, but they cannot be depended upon. There is some flaw in them which takes the edge off their virtue. They may be fairly honest, but you cannot bank on them. It is not difficult to find a lawyer or a physician who knows a good deal, who is eminent in his profession, But it is not so easy to find one who is a man before he is a lawyer or a physician, whose name is a synonym for all that is clean, reliable, solid, substantial. It is not difficult to find a good preacher, but it is not so easy to find a real man, sterling manhood, back of the sermon. It is easy to find successful merchants, but not so easy to find men who put character above merchandise. What the world wants is men who have principle underlying their expertness, principle under their law, their medicine, their business. Men who stand for something outside of their offices and stores, who stand for something in their community, whose very presence carries weight. Everywhere we see smart, clever, long-headed, shrewd men, but how comparatively rare it is to find one whose record is as clean as a hound's tooth, who will not swerve from the right, who would rather fail than be a party to a questionable transaction. Everywhere we see businessmen putting the stumbling blocks of deception and dishonest methods right across their own pathway, tripping themselves up while trying to deceive others. We see men worth millions of dollars filled with terror, trembling lest investigations may uncover things which will damn them in the public estimation. We see them cowed before the law like whipped spaniels, catching at any straw that will save them from public disgrace. What a terrible thing to live in the limelight of popular favor, to be envied as rich and powerful, to be esteemed as honorable and straightforward, and yet to be conscious all the time of not being what the world thinks we are. To live in constant terror of discovery, in fear that something may happen to unmask us and show us up in our true light. But nothing can happen to injure seriously the man who lives foursquare to the world, who has nothing to cover up, nothing to hide from his fellows, who lives a transparent, clean life with never a fear of disclosures. If all of his material possessions are swept away from him, he knows that he has a monument in the hearts of his countrymen, in the affection and admiration of the people, and that nothing can happen to harm his real self because he has kept his record clean. Mr. Roosevelt early resolved that, let what would come, whether he succeeded in what he undertook or failed, whether he made friends or enemies, he would not take chances with his good name. He would part with everything else first, that he would never gamble with his reputation, that he would keep his record clean. His first ambition was to stand for something, to be a man. Before he was a politician or anything else, the man must come first. In his early career, he had many opportunities to make a great deal of money by allying himself with crooked, sneaking, unscrupulous politicians. He had all sorts of opportunities for political graft, but crookedness never had any attraction for him. He refused to be a party to any political jobbery, any underhand business. He preferred to lose any position he was seeking, to let somebody else have it, if he must get smirched in the getting it. He would not touch a dollar, place, or preferment unless it came to him clean, with no trace of jobbery on it. Politicians, who had an axe to grind, knew it was no use to try to bribe him or to influence him with promises of patronage, money, position, or power. Mr. Roosevelt knew perfectly well that he would make many mistakes and many enemies, but he resolved to carry himself in such a way that even his enemies should at least respect him for his honesty of purpose and for his straightforward, square-deal methods. He resolved to keep his record clean, his name white, at all hazards. Everything else seemed unimportant in comparison. In times like these, the world especially needs such men as Mr. Roosevelt, men who hew close to the chalk line of right and hold the line plumb to truth. Men who do not pander to public favor. Men who make duty and truth their goal and go straight to their mark, turning neither to the right nor to the left, though a paradise tempt them. Who can ever estimate how much his influence has done toward purging politics and elevating the American ideal? He has changed the viewpoint of many statesmen and politicians. He has shown them a new and a better way. He has made many of them ashamed of the old methods of grafting and selfish greed. He has held up a new ideal, shown them that unselfish service to their country is infinitely nobler than an ambition for self-aggrandizement. American patriotism has a higher meaning today because of the example of this great American. Many young politicians and statesmen have adopted cleaner methods and higher aims because of his influence. There is no doubt that tens of thousands of young men in this country are cleaner in their lives and more honest and ambitious to be good citizens, because here is a man who always stands for the square deal, for civic righteousness, for American manhood. Every man ought to feel that there is something in him that bribery cannot touch, that influence cannot buy, something that is not for sale, something he would not sacrifice or tamper with for any price, something he would give his life for if necessary. If a man stands for something worthwhile, compels recognition for himself alone on account of his real worth, he is not dependent upon recommendations, upon fine clothes, a fine house, or a pull. He is his own best recommendation. The young man who starts out with the resolution to make his character his capital and to pledge his whole manhood for every obligation he enters into will not be a failure, though he wins neither fame nor fortune. No man ever really does a great thing who loses his character in the process. No substitute has ever yet been discovered for honesty. Multitudes of people have gone to the wall trying to find one. Our prisons are full of people who have attempted to substitute something else for it. No man can really believe in himself when he is occupying a false position and wearing a mask, when the little monitor within him is constantly saying, "You know you are a fraud. You are not the man you pretend to be." The consciousness of not being genuine, not being what others think him to be, robs a man of power, honeycombs the character, and destroys self-respect and self-confidence. When Lincoln was asked to take the wrong side of a case, he said, "I could not do it." All the time while talking to that jury, I should be thinking, "Lincoln, you're a liar, and I believe I should forget myself and say it out loud." Character as capital is very much underestimated by a great number of young men. They seem to put more emphasis upon smartness, shrewdness, long-headedness, cunning, influence, a pull, than upon downright honesty and integrity of character. Yet why do scores of concerns pay enormous sums for the use of the name of a man who, perhaps, has been dead for half a century or more? It is because there is power in that name, because there is character in it, because it stands for something, because it represents reliability and square dealing. Think of what the name of Tiffany, of Park and Tilford, or any of the great names which stand in the commercial world as solid and immovable as the Rock of Gibraltar are worth. Does it not seem strange that young men who know these facts should try to build up a business on a foundation of cunning, scheming, and trickery, instead of building on the solid rock of character, reliability, and manhood? Is it not remarkable that so many men should work so hard to establish a business on an unreliable, flimsy foundation, instead of building upon the solid masonry of honest goods, square dealing, reliability? A name is worth everything until it is questioned, but when suspicion clings to it, it is worth nothing. There is nothing in this world that will take the place of character. There is no policy in the world, to say nothing of the right or wrong of it, that compares with honesty and square dealing. In spite of, or because of, all the crookedness and dishonesty that is being uncovered, of all the scoundrels that are being unmasked, integrity is the biggest word in the business world today. There never was a time in all history when it was so big, and it is growing bigger. There never was a time when character meant so much in business, when it stood for so much everywhere as it does today. There was a time when the man who was the shrewdest and sharpest and cunningest in taking advantage of others got the biggest salary. But today, the man at the other end of the bargain is looming up as never before. Nathan Strauss, when asked the secret of the great success of his firm, said it was their treatment of the man at the other end of the bargain. He said they could not afford to make enemies. They could not afford to displease or to take advantage of customers, or to give them reason to think that they had been unfairly dealt with. That in the long run, the man who gave the squarest deal to the man at the other end of the bargain would get ahead fastest. There are merchants who have made great fortunes, but who do not carry weight among their fellow men because they have dealt all their lives with inferiority. They have lived with shoddy and shams so long that the suggestion has been held in their minds until their whole standards of life have been lowered. Their ideals have shrunken. Their characters have partaken of the quality of their business. Contrast these men with the men who stood for half a century or more at the head of solid houses, substantial institutions, men who have always stood for quality in everything, who have surrounded themselves not only with ability, but with men and women of character. We instinctively believe in character. We admire people who stand for something, who are centered in truth and honesty. It is not necessary that they agree with us. We admire them for their strength, the honesty of their opinions, the inflexibility of their principles. The late Carl Schurz was a strong man and antagonized many people. He changed his political views very often, but even his worst enemies knew there was one thing he would never go back on: friends or no friends, party or no party. And that was his devotion to principle as he saw it. There was no parleying with his convictions. He could stand alone if necessary, with all the world against him. His inconsistencies, his many changes in parties and politics, could not destroy the universal admiration for the man who stood for his convictions. Although he escaped from a German prison and fled his country, where he had been arrested on account of his revolutionary principles, when but a mere youth, Emperor William I had such a profound respect for his honesty of purpose and his strength of character that he invited him to return to Germany and visit him, gave him a public dinner, and paid him great tribute. Who can estimate the influence of President Eliot in enriching and uplifting our national ideas and standards through the thousands of students who go out from Harvard University? The tremendous force and nobility of character of Phillips Brooks raised everyone who came within his influence to higher levels. His great earnestness in trying to lead people up to his lofty ideals swept everything before it. One could not help feeling while listening to him and watching him that there was a mighty triumph of character, a grand expression of superb manhood. Such men as these increase our faith in the race, in the possibilities of the grandeur of the coming man. We are prouder of our country because of such standards. It is the ideal that determines the direction of the life. And what a grand sight, what an inspiration, are those men who sacrifice the dollar to the ideal. The principles by which the problem of success is solved are right and justice, honesty, and integrity, and just in proportion as a man deviates from these principles, he falls short of solving his problem. It is true that he may reach something. He may get money, but is that success? The thief gets money, but does he succeed? Is it any honester to steal by means of a long head than by means of a long arm? It is very much more dishonest, because the victim is deceived and then robbed, a double crime. We often receive letters which read like this: I am getting a good salary, but I do not feel right about it somehow. I cannot still the voice within me that says, wrong, wrong, to what I am doing. Leave it, we always say to the writers of these letters. Do not stay in a questionable occupation, no matter what inducement it offers. Its false light will land you on the rocks if you follow it. It is demoralizing to the mental faculties, paralyzing to the character, to do a thing which one's conscience forbids. Tell the employer who expects you to do questionable things that you cannot work for him unless you can put the trademark of your manhood, the stamp of your integrity, upon everything you do. Tell him that if the highest thing in you cannot bring success, surely the lowest cannot. You cannot afford to sell the best thing in you, your honor, your manhood, to a dishonest man or a lying institution. You should regard even the suggestion that you might sell out for a consideration as an insult. Resolve that you will not be paid for being something less than a man, that you will not lease your ability, your education, your inventiveness, your self-respect for salary to do a man's lying for him, either in writing advertisements, selling goods, or in any other capacity. Resolve that, whatever your vocation, you are going to stand for something, that you are not going to be merely a lawyer, a physician, a merchant, a clerk, a fanner, a congressman, or a man who carries a big money bag, but that you are going to be a man first, last, and all the time. Chapter 11. Happy, if not, why not? We have seen many painful examples during the past few months of the failure of wealth to produce happiness. We have seen that a fortune without a man behind it does not stand for much. The X-rays of public investigation have revealed some ghastly spectacles. Of a number of rich men who were in positions of great responsibility and trust at the beginning of the recent financial panic, some have committed suicide, others have died from the effects of the disgrace which they had brought upon themselves and their families, and still others have suffered tortures, not so much because of their wrongdoings as from the fear of disclosure. A few months ago, these men were supposed to possess the things which make men happy. They had what all the world is seeking so strenuously, money. They lived in palatial homes and were surrounded with luxuries, and yet, the moment misfortune came, what they called happiness fled as though it had the wings of a bird. These men felt secure because they had that which most people are struggling so hard to get. They had supposed themselves so firmly entrenched in the wherewithal of life, so buttressed by their solid investments, that nothing could shake them. But almost in the twinkling of an eye, their foundations slipped from under them. Their reputations vanished, and instead of being the big men they thought they were, they not only found that they were nobodies, but also that their happiness had flown with their reputations. Happiness is not such a transient visitor as that. If these men had had the genuine article, no panic could have shaken it, no fire burned it out, no ocean swallowed it up. Real happiness is not a fluttering fly-away unreality. It is not superficial. It does not live in things. It does not depend upon money. It inheres in character, in personality. It consists in facing life the right way, and no one who faces it the wrong way, no matter how much money he may have, can ever be happy. The trouble with many of the men who went down in the panic was that they put the emphasis upon the wrong thing. Man is built upon the plan of honesty, of rectitude, the divine plan. When he perverts his nature by trying to express dishonesty, chicanery, and cunning, of course, he cannot be happy. The very essence of happiness is honesty, sincerity, truthfulness. He who would have real happiness for his companion must be clean, straightforward, and sincere. The moment he departs from the right, she will take wings and fly away. What a pitiable thing it is to see the human race chasing the dollar, material things, trying to extract happiness, to squeeze joy out of money alone. How little people realize that the very thing they are hunting lives in themselves or nowhere, that if they do not take happiness with them, they may hunt the earth over without finding it. Happiness is a condition of mind. It is a fundamental principle, and he who does not understand the principle cannot possibly be happy. All the misery and the crime of the world rest upon the failure of human beings to understand the principle that no man can really be happy until he harmonizes with the best thing in him, with the divine, and not with the brute. No one can be happy who tries to harmonize his life with his animal instincts. The God, the good in him, is the only possible thing that can make him happy. Real happiness cannot be bribed by anything sordid or low. Nothing mean or unworthy appeals to it. There is no affinity between them. Founded upon principle, it is as scientific as the laws of mathematics, and he who works his problem correctly will get the happiness answer. There is only one way to secure the correct answer to a mathematical problem, and that is to work in harmony with mathematical laws. It would not matter if half the world believed there was some other way to get the answer. It would never come until the law was followed with the utmost exactitude. It does not matter that the great majority of the human race believe there is some other way of reaching the happiness goal. The fact that they are discontented, restless, and unhappy shows that they are not working their problems scientifically. We are all conscious that there is another man inside of us, that there accompanies us through life a divine, silent messenger, that other, higher, better self, which speaks from the depths of our nature and which gives its consent, its amen, to every right action and condemns every wrong one. Men and women in all times have tried to bribe this constant monitor, to purchase its approval, to silence it in nervous excitement, to drown it in vicious pleasure, with drink and with drugs, but all in vain. Men in every age have disregarded its warning, have tried in every possible way to get away from its tormenting reproofs when they have done wrong, but no amount of dissipation or excitement has ever been able to silence its voice. It always continues to give its unbiased, unbribed approval or disapproval to whatever we do. There is nothing in which people deceive themselves so much as in the pursuit of happiness. There is only one way to find it, that is, by obeying the laws upon which we are built. We are constructed along the lines of truth and justice, and we cannot reach felicity by disobeying these, the very laws of our nature. So long as we continue to do evil, to get money by unfair means, by robbing others or taking advantage of them, so long as our ambition is to get rich anyway, we can never attain true happiness because we are going in the wrong direction. We are introducing discord into our natures, encouraging the very opposite to what we are seeking. It is just as impossible for a person to reach the normal state of harmony while he is practicing selfish, grasping methods, as it is to produce harmony in an orchestra with instruments that are all jangled and out of tune. To be happy, we must be in tune with the infinite within us, in harmony with our better selves. There is no way to get around it. The idea that we can practice wrong in our vocations, in our dealings with men, or in our pleasures, and then periodically seek forgiveness in our prayers or through our churches, the idea that a man can do wrong and be forgiven without remedying the wrong or without forsaking the sin, has done more harm than almost any other thing in civilization. A clear conscience, a clean life, the elimination of selfishness, jealousy, envy, and hatred are necessary to all high enjoyment. One trouble with many of us is that we try to make happiness too complicated an affair. But happiness really flees from complication, ceremony, and pretense. Nature has fixed her everlasting edict against complicated living. You can never force pleasure. It must be natural. It must come from sane living. Real happiness is so simple that most people do not recognize it. They think it comes from doing something on a big scale, from a big fortune, or from some great achievement, when, in fact, it is derived from the simplest, the quietest, the most unpretentious things in the world. Our great problem is to fill each day so full of sunshine, of plain living and high thinking, that there can be no commonness or unhappiness in our lives. Little kindnesses, pleasant words and helps by the way, trifling courtesies and encouragements, duties faithfully done, unselfish service, work that we enjoy, friendships, love and affection. All these are simple things, yet they are what constitute happiness. The great sanitariums, the noted springs of the world, are crowded with rich people, sent there by their physicians to get rid of the effects of complicated living. They tried to force their pleasures and came to grief. Not long ago, I dined in the home of a very rich man, and it took 2 hours and a half to serve the dinner. There were 13 courses made up of the richest kinds of food, and many of them absolutely incompatible with one another. In addition to this, there were 7 kinds of wine. Think of anyone being healthy or happy living upon such a diet. What are the enjoyments of the average rich? Is there anything more vapid, insipid, unsatisfying than the chasing after that indefinite, mysterious something which they call happiness? That will-o'-the-wisp, which is always beckoning them on, but ever eluding their grasp. That rainbow which recedes as they approach. They may enjoy the titillation of the nerves for a moment, the temporary excitement and exhilaration which come from even vicious pleasures. But what of it all? It is only animal enjoyment. Nothing but regret, disappointment, and disgust follow. There is within every normal person a strong desire to do something and to be something in the world. And every idler knows that he is violating the fundamental demand of his nature, that he is really cheating himself out of a very sacred prize, the getting of which would mean more to him than everything else in the world. I have talked with idle, rich young men who said they knew that it was all wrong for them to refuse to do their part of the world's work, that it was a mistake for them not to enter into the activities of life and struggle for a prize which the Creator had fitted them to take, but that the paralyzing effect of not being obliged to work had undermined their inclination. Recently, a rich young man was asked why he did not work. "I do not have to," he said. "Do not have to" has ruined more young men than almost anything else. The fact is, nature never made any provision for the idle man. Vigorous activity is the law of life. It is the saving grace, the only thing that can keep a human being from retrograding. Activity along the line of one's highest ambition is the normal state of man, and he who tries to evade it pays the penalty in deterioration of faculty, in paralysis of efficiency. Do not flatter yourself that you can be really happy unless you are useful. Happiness and usefulness were born twins. To separate them is fatal. It is as impossible for a human being to be happy who is habitually idle as it is for a fine chronometer to be normal when not running. The highest happiness is the feeling of well-being which comes to one who is actively employed in doing what he was made to do, carrying out the great life purpose patterned in his individual bent. The practical fulfilling of the life purpose is to man what the actual running and keeping time are to the watch. Without action, both are meaningless. There is no tonic like that which comes from doing things worthwhile. There is no happiness like that which conies from doing our level best every day, everywhere. No satisfaction like that which comes from stamping our superiority, putting our royal trademark upon everything which goes through our hands. Man was made to do things. Nothing else can take the place of achievement in his life. Real happiness without achievement of some worthy aim is unthinkable. One of the greatest satisfactions in this world is the feeling of enlargement, of growth, of stretching upward and onward. No pleasure can surpass that which comes from the consciousness of feeling one's horizon of ignorance being pushed farther and farther away, of making headway in the world, of not only getting on, but also of getting up. Happiness is incompatible with stagnation. A man must feel his expanding power lifting, tugging away at a lofty purpose, or he will miss the joy of living. The discords, the bickerings and divorces, the breaking up of rich homes, and the resorting to all sorts of silly devices by many rich people in their pursuit of happiness prove that it does not dwell within them, that happiness does not abide with low ideals, with selfishness, idleness, and discord. It is a friend of harmony, of truth and beauty, of affection and simplicity. Multitudes of men have made fortunes, but have murdered their capacity for enjoyment in the process. How often we hear the remark, "He has the money, but cannot enjoy it." A man can have no greater delusion than that he can spend the best years of his life coining all of his energies into dollars, neglecting his home, sacrificing friendships, self-improvement, and everything else that is really worthwhile for money, and yet find happiness at the end. If a man coins his ability, his opportunities into dollars, and during all the years he is accumulating wealth neglects the cultivation of the only faculties which are capable of appreciating the highest happiness, he cannot effectively revive his atrophied brain cells. His enjoyment, after he makes his money, must come from the exercise of the same faculties which he has employed in making it. He cannot undo the results of a life habit after he retires from business. If you have not kept alive your ability to appreciate the beautiful, the good, and the true, you will be as surprised to find that it has left you as Darwin was when, in middle life, He discovered all at once that he had lost his power to appreciate Shakespeare and music. We ought to be able to get a good living, even to make fortunes, and yet have a jolly good time every day of our lives. This idea of being a slave most of the time, and of only occasionally enjoying a holiday, is all wrong. Every day should be a holiday, a day of joy and gladness, a day of supreme happiness, and it would be if we lived sanely, if we knew the secret of right thinking and normal living. Isn't it strange that so few people ever think of making happiness a daily duty, that they should put this everlasting emphasis upon their vocations, on money-making, and let the thing for which they really live come incidentally or without planning? The making of a life should be emphasized infinitely more than the making of a living. Few people ever learn the art of enjoying the little things of life as they go along. Yet it is the little, everyday enjoyments and satisfactions that count most in a lifetime. Almost every person I know is living in anticipation, not in reality. He is not actually living the life he has always looked forward to or expected to attain, but is just getting ready to live, just getting ready to enjoy it. When he gets a little more money, a little better house, a little more of the comforts of life, a little more leisure, a little more freedom from responsibility, he will then be ready to enjoy life. It is a rare thing to find a person who can truthfully say, "I am really living. This is the life I have been striving for, the life that I have looked forward to as being as near my ideal as I am likely to find in this world." It is a great thing, so to cultivate the art of happiness, that we can get pleasure out of the common experiences of every day. The happiness habit is just as necessary to our best welfare as the work habit, or the honesty or square dealing habit. No one can do his best, his highest work, who is not perfectly normal, and happiness is a fundamental necessity of our being. It is an indication of health, of sanity, of harmony. The opposite is a symptom of disease, of abnormality. There are plenty of evidences in the human economy that we were intended for happiness, that it is our normal condition, that suffering, unhappiness, discontent are absolutely foreign and abnormal to our natures. There is no doubt that our life was intended to be one grand, sweet song. We are built upon the plan of harmony, and every form of discord is abnormal. There is something wrong when any human being in this world, tuned to infinite harmonies and beauties that are unspeakable, is unhappy and discontented. One of the most inexplicable mysteries that has ever puzzled the selfish rich is their failure to find happiness where they had expected to find it. The bitterest disappointment that comes to people who have made fortunes is that the wealth did not bring the happiness which it promised, or anything like it. They find that the affections do not feed on material things, that the heart would starve in the midst of the greatest luxuries alone. They find that while money can do many things, it has little power to satisfy the heart yearnings, the heart hunger. How many women there are in palatial homes in this country who are starving for happiness and who would gladly exchange all their luxuries for the love of a good man, even if he had not a dollar in the world? No selfish life can ever be happy. I am acquainted with a self-made man who has made a fortune, who tells me that the greatest enigma and disappointment of his life lie in the fact that although he has made millions, he is not happy. He says that somehow he has never been able to make many friends, that people avoid him, that he has never been able to get the confidence of others to any very great extent, and that he is not popular even among his own neighbors. He cannot understand why he is not happy, for, he tells me, he has tried very hard to find happiness. The trouble with him is that he has always done everything with reference to himself. He did not mean to be selfish, but the whole passion of his life has been to make money, because he thought that would bring everything else that is desirable. He has chosen his friends for their ability to advance his interests, and has considered every step in life with reference to the effect it would have upon him. What is there in it for me? Seems to have been the interrogation point in his life. Now, happiness is a reflection, an echo, a part of what we do and think. It does not depend upon our material possessions. Thoreau's cabin at Walden Pond cost only $31, and yet Thoreau was rich and happy because he had a rich mind. It is as impossible for the selfish, greedy, grasping thought, the thought always centered upon one's own interest, to produce a happy state of mind as it is for thistle seeds to produce wheat. But if we sow helpfulness, kindness, unselfishness, we shall reap a harvest of satisfaction, harmony, and happiness. Selfishness and real happiness never go together. They are fatally antagonistic. An inordinate ambition, a desire to get ahead of others, a mania to keep up appearances at all hazards, whether we can afford it or not, all these things feed selfishness, that corrosive acid which eats away our possible enjoyment and destroys the very sources of happiness. The devouring ambition to get ahead of others in money-making, to outshine others socially, develops a sordid, grasping disposition which is the bane of happiness. No man with greed developed big within him can be happy. Neither contentment, satisfaction, serenity, affection, nor any other member of the happiness family can exist in the presence of greed. It is as impossible for a man who has been dishonest, who has gotten his wealth by crushing others and by taking advantage of them, to be happy as it is for a person really to enjoy himself while walking with pebbles in his shoes or while constantly being nettled with pinpricks. No man can be happy who is conscious of being a drone, of shirking his share in the great world's work, who knows that he is taking all the good things he can get hold of in life's great granary, put there by the toilers, and is putting nothing back. A debauched mind that has departed from the principles of right thinking and right living has incapacitated itself for real enjoyment. The only way to get the happiness that is worthwhile is to live a straight, clean, pure, honest, useful life. There is no power in the universe that can make a human being happy along any other lines. Straightforward, honest work, a determined endeavor to do one's best, an earnest desire to scatter flowers instead of thorns, to make other people a little better off, a little happier because of our existence, these are the only recipes for real happiness. No man can be happy when he despises his own acts, when he has any consciousness of wrong, whether of motive or act. No man can be happy when he harbors thoughts of revenge, jealousy, envy, or hatred. He must have a clean heart and a clean conscience, or no amount of money or excitement can make him happy. Chapter 12. Originality. No human being ever yet made a success trying to be somebody else, even if that person was a success. Success cannot be copied, cannot be successfully imitated. It is an original force, an individual creation. Every man will be a failure just in proportion as he gets away from himself and tries to be somebody else and to express somebody else instead of himself. Power comes from within or from nowhere. Be yourself. Listen to the voice within. There is room for improvement in every profession, in every trade, and in every business. The world wants men who can do things in new and better ways. Don't think, because your plan or idea has no precedent, or because you are young and inexperienced, that you will not get a hearing. The man who has anything new and valuable to give to the world will be listened to and will be followed. The man of strong individuality, who dares to think his own thought and originate his own method, who is not afraid to be himself and is not a copy of someone else, quickly gets recognition. Nothing else will attract the attention of an employer or the rest of the world so quickly as originality and unique ways of doing things, especially if they are effective. Blaze your own way, make your own path, or you will never make any impression on the world. It is striking originality that attracts attention. The world admires the man who has the courage to lift his head above the crowd, who dares to step to the front and declare himself. Never before was originality so much at a premium. The world makes way for the man with an idea. It is the thinker, the man with original ideas and new and up-to-date methods, who is the real productive force in a community. He is wanted everywhere. But there is very little demand for human machines. The world is full of followers, leaners, and taggers who are willing to walk in old trails and to have their thinking done for them. But it is seeking the man with original force, who leaves the beaten track and pushes into new fields, the physician who departs from the precedent of those who have gone before him, the lawyer who conducts his case in an original way, the teacher who brings new ideas and methods into the schoolroom, and the clergyman who has the courage to proclaim the message which God has given to him, not that given to some other man who has put it into a book. The world wants preachers who get their sermons out of life, not out of a library. There are 1,000 people who will do faithfully what they are told, to one who can lay out a program or execute it, 1,000 who can only follow, to one who can lead. It is a rare thing to find a young man who has the power of initiative and the ability to put a thing through with the force of originality. Whatever your work in life, do not follow others. Do not imitate. Do not do things just as everybody else has done them before, but in new, ingenious ways. Show the people in your specialty that precedents do not cut much of a figure with you, and that you will make your own program. Resolve that, whether you accomplish much or little in the world, it shall be original, your own. Do not be afraid to assert yourself in a bold, individual way. Originality is power, life. Imitation is death. Do not be afraid to let yourself out. You grow by being original, never by copying, by leading, never by following. Resolve that you will be a man of ideas, always on the lookout for improvement. Think to some purpose. There is always a place for an original man. There is nothing else which will kill the creative faculty and paralyze growth more quickly than following precedents in everything and doing everything in the same old way. I have known progressive young men to stop growing, become hopelessly ruddy, and lose all their progressiveness by going into their father's stores, factories, or places of business where everything was done in the same old-fashioned way and precedents were followed in everything. They lost all expansiveness. There was no motive for reaching out for the new and the original because their fathers would not change. I have seen splendid fellows who might have become great and grand men shrivel to pygmies in their fathers' ruts. How many of our business houses are weighted down with machinery, old, antiquated methods, ponderous bookkeeping, and out-of-date appliances, when new devices or new methods with shortcut ways of doing things would enable them to economize greatly on room and to get along with much less help, but they cling to the old with a fatal tenacity. This is why so many old concerns which have been strong and powerful for generations gradually shrink, shrivel, get into ruts, and fail, while their newer competitors, the bright young men who have gone out from these houses, do things in a new way, adopt up-to-date methods, keep up with the times, and go on to greater success. There is a great advertising quality in originality, or uniqueness. The man who does business like the great majority of men, although he may have superior ability, does not attract much attention. But if he makes his own path, adopts original and progressive methods, puts his specialty in a class by itself, and attracts attention, everybody who patronizes him is a traveling advertisement for him. There is a specialty store in Boston whose progressive proprietors make a study of original ways of doing everything. For example, all change is given in brand new money, direct from the United States Treasury or Mint. This does not cost much and causes but little trouble, yet it is a very shrewd advertisement. It is especially attractive to women and children and has brought a great deal of trade. Aside from the danger of handling old soiled money, which has been no one knows where, it gives a sense of pleasure to handle new, crisp bills and brand new, bright coins. This is only one of the many unique methods this concern adopts. People flock to the most up-to-date establishments, for they know that the newest styles, the latest and freshest goods, the greatest variety, the best display of taste, and the most appropriate things are to be found there. It is well known that those up-to-date houses pay the largest salaries and have the best buyers. There is a hotel in New York which needs no advertising. It is one of the institutions which people visit out of interest, and they are always talking about it. Other things being equal, they will patronize it. If they cannot afford to have rooms there, they will go there to dine, to see the fashions and prominent people. The amount of free advertising which this hotel has had, in addition to what, perhaps, other first-class hotels get, would probably have cost, if paid for, half as much as the hotel is worth. The same is true in every line of endeavor. It is the newest and the most up-to-date concern that has the latest devices and the freshest and most original ideas that draws the people. Do not, however, make the mistake of thinking that if you simply do things in new ways, you will necessarily be successful. It is effective originality that counts. There are thousands of men who are always chasing new ideas, new ways of doing things, who never accomplish anything of note because they are not effective, not practical. I know a man who adopts every new device that comes along and has thus practically run through a large estate left him because he did not have the judgment or the sagacity to select really effective devices or methods in the management of his affairs. The shrewdest thing a young man can do, to say nothing of the influence upon his character, is to put the greatest possible originality and the highest possible excellence into everything he does, to make a resolution, at the very outset of his career, to stamp his individuality upon everything that goes out of his hands, and to determine that everything he does shall have the imprint of his character upon it as a trademark of the highest and best that is in him. If he does this, he will not require a large amount of capital to start a business and to advertise it. His greatest resources will be in himself. Originality is the best substitute for advertising, as well as the best thing to advertise if quality goes with it. Some men are absolutely afraid to do things in a new way. They must follow somebody else. What was good enough for my father and grandfather is good enough for me, seems to be their motto. They cannot see any reason for changing. They must have a precedent for everything, or they reject it. They cannot appreciate a new idea or a new way of doing things. They think there must be something the matter with it if it has not been used before. They have a peculiar love for the old. The antique appeals to them. They think the value of things lies in their age. These people with hidebound intellect stand in the way of progress. Every town has these precedent men in the same old-sized stores with the same old out-of-date show windows, the same methods of displaying goods, the same old cumbersome systems in the counting room. They are progress-proof. New ideas frighten them. The precedent man is always nonplussed, embarrassed by anything new or when confronted with a condition which requires something original. He must get hold of something which has been used before, or he is powerless. Many people think it is unfortunate to be unlike others in their personalities. They are always afraid of being thought peculiar or eccentric. Yet the Creator never made two things alike, nor any two people alike. Nature breaks her mold at every new birth. Great characters always have strong individuality and originality, characteristics which mark them from the crowd. To be eccentric is not to be weak, but more often it is a sign of strength. Lincoln had eccentricities, but they were inseparable from his great character. Eccentricities which do not make a person disagreeable or repulsive are often advantageous rather than disadvantageous. What is more monotonous than a dead-level, insipid character that has no strongly marked features which individualize it? We all love a great nature, a strong, vigorous, rugged personality which impresses us with power, something colossal which looms above us and inspires us with awe and admiration, such as we feel when standing under some mighty mountain cliff towering above us into the clouds. We do not wish the rugged crags smoothed off. They add to the peak's sublimity. They suggest majesty and power. Why should we want to plane off the eccentricities of a great character or the individuality which characterizes him and distinguishes him from all others? We believe in the original man or woman who does not remind us of others, who makes a new, strong, vigorous, and lasting impression upon us, who does not imitate or follow, who makes his own program, who acts upon his own judgment, who leans upon nobody, and who does not ask advice, but acts fearlessly, boldly, independently. We know there is force there that can do things, that can achieve, a reserve power that makes its possessor a master. Fearlessness is a quality absolutely necessary to great achievement. Courage always accompanies force. It is a marked quality of the original man. Imitators are timid, weak. Do not be afraid of being original. Be an independent, self-reliant new man, not just one more individual in the world. Do not try to be a copy of your grandfather, your father, or your neighbor. That is as foolish as for a violet to try to be like a rose, or for a daisy to ape a sunflower. Nature has given each a peculiar equipment for its purpose. Every man is born to do a certain work in an original way. If he tries to copy some other man, or to do some other man's work, he will be an abortion, a misfit, a failure. Do not imitate even your heroes. Scores of young clergymen attempted to make their reputations by imitating Beecher. They copied his voice and conversation and imitated his gestures and his habits, but they fell as far short of the great man's power as the chromo falls short of the masterpiece. Where are those hundreds of imitators now? Not one of them has ever made any stir in the world. The world puts its ban upon all imitations. It despises a man who tags on to somebody else, leans or imitates. He is always classed as a weakling, without force, power, or individuality. We hear a great deal about the dangers of the one-man power in our great corporations. People say that they should be managed by large committees or boards of directors, that too much power should not be put into the hands of one man. But there is one original, dominating character in every committee, on every board of directors, who towers above all the others and ultimately rules. It is impossible to get away from the domination of a strong, original, forceful character. Just be yourself. The consciousness that you are not another in the slightest degree, that there is no suggestion of being a copy of somebody else about you, is a great power in itself. It increases your confidence. The very reputation of being original buttresses you in any community. It helps you to have people say, after talking with you, "There, I met an original man today who did not even remind me of anybody else I have ever seen." It is refreshing to talk with a man who never reminds you of others, who uses no cant, who is not the slave of precedent, who walks on his own legs, who has no use for crutches, and who never leans. A man of force who radiates power. Why try to be somebody else? To be yourself, or to express yourself with originality and power, is the greatest thing you can do. You cannot be another if you try. It only makes you unnatural and ridiculous, and robs you of the power which comes from self-expression, from being yourself. The more you differ from another man by nature, the more ridiculous you will make yourself by attempting to imitate him. Real strength inheres in personality. Chapter 13. Had money, but lost it. A prominent New York lawyer of wide experience says that, in his opinion, 99 out of every 100 of those who make money or inherit it lose it sooner or later. What a spectacle, everywhere in this land of plenty, of inexhaustible resources and unlimited opportunity, where every man ought to be a king, to see God's noblemen living like European peasants because they never learned to do business in a business way. How many thousands of good, honest men and women there are in this country who have worked very hard and made all sorts of sacrifices of comfort and luxury in order to lay up something for the future, and yet have reached middle life or later without having anything to show for it. Many of them, indeed, finding themselves without a home or any probability of getting one, without property or a cent of money laid by for sickness, for the inevitable emergency, or for their declining years. It seems incredible that a strong, sturdy, self-made man who has had to fight his way up from poverty and who feels the backache in every dollar he has earned should let his savings slip through his fingers in the most foolish investments, with scarcely any investigation, often sending his money thousands of miles away to people he has never seen and about whom he knows practically nothing, except through an advertisement which has attracted his attention, or through the wiles of some smooth, unprincipled promoter. Great numbers of vast fortunes in this country have been and are being built up on the very ignorance of the masses in regard to business methods. The schemers bank on it that it is easy to swindle people who do not know how to protect their property. They thrive on the ignorance of their fellows. They know that a shrewd advertisement, a cunningly worded circular, a hypnotic appeal will bring the hard earnings of these unsuspecting people out of hiding places into their own coffers. For the sake of your home, for the protection of your hard earnings, for your peace of mind, your self-respect, your self-confidence, whatever else you do, do not neglect a good, solid business training and get it as early in life as possible. It will save you from many a foal, from 1,000 embarrassments, and perhaps from the humiliation of being compelled to face your wife and children and confess that you have been a failure. It may spare you the mortification of having to move from a good home to a poor one, of seeing your property slip out of your hands, and of having to acknowledge your weakness and your lack of foresight and thoughtfulness. Or it may prevent your being made the dupe of sharpers. Many men who once had good stores of their own are working as clerks, floor walkers, or superintendents of departments in other people's stores just because they risked and lost everything in some venture. As they now have others depending on them, they do not dare to take the risks which they took in young manhood to get a new start, and so they struggle along in mediocre positions, still mocked with ambitions which they have no chance to gratify. How many inventors and discoverers have fought the fight of desperation amidst poverty and deprivation for years and years, and have succeeded in giving the world that which helps to emancipate man from drudgery and to ameliorate the hard conditions of civilization, and yet have allowed others to snatch their victories away from them and leave them penniless, just because they did not know how to protect themselves. Thousands of people who were once in easy circumstances are living in poverty and wretchedness today, because they failed to put an understanding or an agreement in writing, or to do business in a business way. Families have been turned, penniless, out of house and home, because they trusted to a relative or a friend to do what was right by them, without making a hard and fast, practical business arrangement with him. It does not matter how honest people are, they may forget, and it is so easy for misunderstandings to arise that it is never safe to leave anything of importance to a mere oral statement. Reduce it to writing. It costs but little, in time or money, and when all parties interested are agreed, that is the best time to formulate the agreement in exact terms. This will often save lawsuits, bitterness, and alienations. How many friendships have been broken because understandings were not put in writing, whereas thousands of cases are in the courts today for this reason, and a large part of lawyers' incomes is derived from them. Many people have a foolish idea that others, especially friends or relatives, will be sensitive and think their honesty questioned if they are asked to put their proposition, or agreement, or understanding in writing. It is not a question of confidence. It is a question of business, and business should be done in a business way, so that in case of death or some other unforeseen event, every possibility of complication or misunderstanding will be eliminated. The very people you may think will be sensitive or offended because you are so exacting will really think more of you for your straightforward business methods and your carefulness in avoiding misunderstanding. Many a cultured girl has been thrown suddenly on her own resources by the failure or the death of her father, and has found herself wholly incapable of administering his affairs or of earning a living. Many women, their husbands having died suddenly, are left with large business responsibilities, which they are utterly unfit to assume. They are at the mercy of designing lawyers or dishonest businessmen, who well know that they are mere babies in their hands when it comes to important transactions. Business talent is as rare as a talent for mathematics. We find boys and girls turned out of school and college full of theories and of all sorts of knowledge or smatterings of knowledge, but without the ability to protect themselves from human thieves who are trying to get something for nothing. No girl or boy should be allowed to graduate, especially from any of the higher institutions, without being well grounded in practical business methods. Parents who send their children out in life without seeing that they are well versed in ordinary business principles do them an incalculable injustice. I have heard a young woman boast that she did not know anything about money matters and had no desire to. She said that she had no idea of the value of $1, that she could spend all the money she could get, but that it was distasteful to her to discuss economy. Many such women object to any common-sense consideration of the financial question. They think it is not necessary for them to know anything about money from the purely business point of view, as they consider that phase of life belongs wholly to their fathers or brothers or husbands. An instructive example of the result of such spirit and ignorance I found in a lady who had lost her property through a lack of business knowledge. She told me that she knew nothing whatever about business. She had never known the value of money. Her husband died and left her with a large property, and it was her custom to sign any paper or document that her lawyer or agents presented to her, usually without reading. The people who had charge of her property knew that she knew nothing about business and took advantage of her ignorance. They got her property away from her, and she did not have enough left even to conduct a legal fight to get it back. Thousands of girls are sent out into the world with what is called finished educations, who cannot even give a proper receipt for money, to say nothing of drawing a promissory note, a draft, or a bill, or understanding the significance and importance of business contracts. Such a woman presented a check for payment to the paying teller of her bank. He passed it back to her with the request that she be kind enough to endorse it. The lady wrote on the back of the check, "I have done business with this bank for many years, and I believe it to be all right. Mrs. James B. Brown." A society woman in New York presented a check for payment at a bank, and the teller told her that it was not signed. "Oh, do they have to be signed?" she responded. "What an awful lot of red tape there is about the banking business." I know of a lady whose husband made a deposit for her in a bank and gave her a checkbook so that she could pay her bills without calling on him for money. One day, she received a notice from the bank that her account was overdrawn. She went to the bank and told the teller that there must be a mistake about it because she still had a lot of checks left in her book. She knew so little about business methods that she thought she could keep drawing any amount until the checks were all gone. This sounds ridiculous and almost incredible, yet the very girl who laughs at it may make even more absurd blunders. Many an accomplished woman, when given a pen and asked to sign an important document drawn up by an attorney or a long-headed businessman, will sign it without reading it, or even asking to be informed of its contents, only to learn afterwards by disastrous results that she has signed away her property and turned herself out of her home. Only a short time ago, I read of a lady who had won a suit involving about $20,000. New evidence, however, was brought forward, which caused the court immediately to reverse its decision. It was proved that the lady had sworn falsely. She was perfectly innocent of any such intention, but she had sworn that she had never signed her name to a certain document. The document was produced, and, to her utter astonishment, she saw her signature affixed to it. She acknowledged at once that the signature was hers, although she had just sworn that she had never signed the paper in question. It appeared that, during her husband's lifetime, whenever papers were to be signed, he told her where to write her name, and she did as she was told, without having the slightest idea of the contents of the papers. Many people have come to grief by giving full power of attorney to their lawyer or business agent. Very few impractical people, especially women, understand the significance of a full power of attorney, which authorizes the person so empowered to deal with your property in all respects as if it were his own, or as if he had for the time being assumed your personality. He may sign your name to any instrument. He may bind you to anything he pleases. He may draw money from your bank. He may impersonate you in all business transactions. In short, As far as business arrangements are concerned, he stands practically and legally for yourself. This is a tremendous power to place in the hands of another, and people should be very careful to whom they assign it. It should never be conferred on any person but one whose honesty is above suspicion, and whose knowledge of business and of men and affairs has been tried and proved. Oh, I signed a paper, giving full power of attorney to my lawyer before I went abroad. I trusted everything to him, and when I came back, practically everything was gone. My business affairs were so complicated that I have not had the money to fight the man I trusted. This was, in brief, the story of one man's wrecked finances, as he told it to me. Women will often pay out large sums of money and never think of asking for a receipt, especially if they are dealing with friends or people they know well. Intelligent women, however, ought to know that our government is a good example of how we should do business. It does not doubt President Roosevelt's honesty, and yet he must sign a voucher for his salary just the same as the cheapest government employee. The justices of the United States Supreme Court, who are considered to be the soul of honor and are the final arbiters of all great questions, must also sign a receipt for their salaries. If every child in America had a thorough business training, tens of thousands of promoters, long-headed, cunning schemers who have thriven on the people's ignorance, would be out of an occupation. I believe that the business colleges are among the greatest blessings in American civilization today, because through their teaching, they have been the means of saving thousands of homes and have made happy and comfortable tens of thousands of people who might otherwise be living in poverty and wretchedness. This ignorance of practical business principles is very common among professional men. I know clergymen, journalists, authors, doctors, teachers, men in every profession, who are constantly subjected to serious embarrassment by their incapacity in business matters. Some of them do not know how to interpret the simplest business forms. Not long ago, a Harvard graduate, occupying a very important position as a teacher, went to the president of a commercial school and asked him to give him some lessons on how to handle money, notes, etc. He said that when he went to his bank and asked them how much money he had there, they laughed at him, and that when a bank draft came to him, he did not know what to do with it. Nothing will stand you in better stead in the hard, cold, practical, everyday world than a good, sound business education. You will find that your success in any trade, occupation, or profession will depend as much on your general knowledge of men and affairs as on your technical training. No matter what your vocation may be, you must be a businessman first, or you will always be placed at a great disadvantage in the practical affairs of life. We cannot entirely ignore the money side of existence any more than we can. The food side and the very foundation of a practical, successful life is the ability to know how to manage the money side effectively. It is infinitely harder to save money and to invest it wisely than to make it, and if even the most practical men who have had a long training in scientific business methods, find it a difficult thing to hold on to money after they make it, what is likely to happen to people who have had practically no training in business methods? Chapter 14. Sizing Up People. After Alexander the Great had conquered the Persians, he became suddenly very ill. One of his generals sent him a letter saying that his attending physician had resolved to poison him. He read the letter without the slightest sign of emotion and put it under his pillow. When the physician came and prepared medicine, Alexander said he would not take it just then, but told him to put it where he could reach it, and at the same time gave him the letter from his general. Alexander raised himself on his elbow and watched the physician's face with the most searching scrutiny, looking into his very soul. But he did not see in it the slightest evidence of fear or guilt. He immediately reached for the medicine bottle and, without a word, drank its contents. The amazed physician asked him how he could do that after receiving such a letter. Alexander replied, "Because you are an honest man." Alexander was a remarkable student of human nature. He knew men and the motives which actuated them. He could read the human heart as an open book. The art of all arts for the leader is this ability to measure men, to weigh them, to size them up, to estimate their possibilities, to place them so as to call out their strength and eliminate their weakness. This is the epitaph which Andrew Carnegie has chosen for himself. Here lies a man who knew how to get around him men much cleverer than himself. People wonder how a Morgan, a Harriman, a Ryan, a Wanamaker can carry on such prodigious enterprises. The secret lies in their ability to project themselves through a mighty system, and to choose men who will fit the places they are put in, men who can carry out their employer's program to the letter. Marshall Field was always studying his employees and trying to read their futures. Nothing escaped his keen eye. Even when those about him did not know that he was thinking of them, he was taking their measure at every opportunity. His ability to place men, to weigh and measure them, to pierce all pretense, amounted to genius. When he missed a man from a certain counter, he would often ask his manager what had become of him. When told that he was promoted, he would keep track of him until he missed him again, and then would ask where he was. He always wanted to see how near the man came to his estimate of him. He thus kept track of men of promise in his employ and watched their advancement. In this way, he became an expert in human nature reading. Mr. Field would sometimes pick out a man for a position the choice of whom his advisors would tell him they thought a mistake, but he was nearly always right, because he had greater power of discernment than the others. He did not pay much attention to the claims of the applicant, or to what he said, because he could see through the surface and measure the real man. He had a wonderful power for taking a man's mental caliber. He could see in which direction his strength lay, and he could see his weak points as few men could. A man who had been his general manager for many years once resigned very suddenly to go into business for himself. Without the slightest hesitation or concern, Mr. Field called to his office a man whom he had been watching unknown to the man for a long time. With very few words, he made him general manager, and so great was his confidence that he had measured the man correctly, that the very next day he sailed for Europe. He did not think it necessary to wait and see how his new manager turned out. He believed he had the right man and that he could trust him. He was not disappointed. Men who are capable of succeeding in a large way are shrewd enough to know that they do not know it all, shrewd enough to employ men who are strong where they are weak, to surround themselves with men who have the ability which they lack, who can supplement their weakness and shortcomings with strength and ability. Thus, in their combined power, they make an effective force. Many men, because of their inability to read human nature, duplicate their own weaknesses in their employees, thus multiplying their chances of failure. Few men are able to see their own weaknesses and limitations, and those who do not surround themselves with men who have the same weak links in their character, and the result is that their whole institution is weak. The leader must not only be able to judge others, but he must also be able to read himself, to take an inventory of his own strong points and weak points. Men who have been elected to high office or to fill very important positions at the head of great concerns because of their recognized ability have often disappointed the expectations of those who placed their hopes in them simply because they could not read people. They may have been well educated, well posted, strong intellectually, may have had a great deal of general ability, but they lacked the skill to read men, to measure them, to weigh them, to place them where they belonged. Grant was cut out for a general, a military leader, but when he got into the White House, he felt out of place. He was shorn of his great power. He could not use his greatest ability. He was obliged to depend too much upon the advice of friends. The result was that, as president, he did not maintain the high reputation he had made as a general. If he had had the same ability to read politicians and to estimate men for government positions that he had for judging of military ability, he would have made a great president. But he felt his weakness in the position which he was not fitted by nature to fill, and made the fatal mistake of putting himself into the hands of his friends. The young man starting out for himself ought to make a study of his power of penetration, of his character reading ability. He ought to make it a business to study men, to estimate their capabilities and the motives which actuate them. He should scrutinize their actions, watch their tendencies in little things, and learn to read them as an open book. The involuntary acts and natural manner of a man indicate more than does his studied conversation. The eye cannot lie. It speaks the truth in all languages. It often contradicts the tongue. While the man is trying to deceive you with words, his eyes are telling you the truth. His actions are indicative of the real man, while the tongue may only represent the diplomat, the man who is acting. A very successful businessman in New York, noted for his ability to read men, will sometimes study an applicant for an important position for a long time, talking very little himself, but all the time trying to call the man out, watching every movement, scrutinizing every word, trying to read the motive behind every glance of the eye. His manner, everything, are all letters of the alphabet by which he spells out the real man. I have been in his office when he was measuring a man. It was a great lesson to watch his face as he seemed to read the applicant through and through, weigh him on the scale of his judgment, penetrate to the very marrow of his being, and estimate his capabilities and possibilities to a nicety. After a few minutes' conversation, and the man had passed out, he would tell me just how large that man was, what he was capable of doing, what his future would be, and what were his limitations. And he seldom makes a mistake. I have never known a man to succeed to any extent when he said there was nothing in him, and I have never known one to turn out badly when he endorsed him without reserve. We all know heads of business houses who work like slaves, dig and save, and yet do not make much headway, simply because they do not know how to surround themselves with the right men. Some men seem incapable of projecting system and order through their establishments. They may do their own work well, and then they strike their limitations. They are not good judges of human nature. Their discernment is not sharp. They are misled by conversational powers, display of education, and often place a theoretical man where only practical talent could succeed. They are likely to place a man of great refinement, sensitiveness, delicate makeup, in a position where a strong, robust, thick-skinned man is required, where an oversensitive soul will chafe and shrink from the cold, aggressive business methods necessary to effective, efficient management. People are continually being led into all sorts of unfortunate positions, entangling alliances, and mortifying, embarrassing situations because of their lack of ability to read human nature and to estimate character at a glance. Good people everywhere are being imposed upon and are losing their money in all sorts of foolish investments because of their ignorance of human nature. They are not able to see the rascal, the scoundrel behind the mask. They have not developed the power of discernment, the ability to see the wolf in sheep's clothing. The knowledge of human nature as a protector of money, of character as a protector against frauds and imposition, is inestimable. Gullible people are proverbially poor readers of human nature, and hence they are always open to imposition. Oily, cunning promoters are keen observers of human nature, and they can tell very quickly when they strike a good-natured, large-hearted professor, scholar, clergyman, or artist who knows very little about business matters and who trusts everybody. They know that if they can only get an opportunity, they can very quickly make such a man believe almost anything. They know he will be an easy prey to their wiles and their keener knowledge of men. These promoters would not think of tackling a shrewd, level-headed businessman for their nefarious schemes, because he is too keen, too sharp, too good a judge of human nature. Such a man would be likely to penetrate the mask and see the real motive beneath the oily, honeyed words, the smooth, seductive manner. The ability to read people at sight is a great business asset. Expertness in reading human nature is just as valuable to a young lawyer as a knowledge of law. It is as valuable to a physician as a knowledge of medicine. The man who can read human nature, who can size up a person quickly, who can arrive at an accurate estimate of character, no matter what his vocation or profession, has a great advantage over others. With some men, the power to read people aright amounts to an instinct. They look through all pretenses. They tear off all masks. They see the man as he is, his reality, and measure him for what he is worth. A man possessing this power of character reading pays little attention to what a person seeking employment may say of himself. He can see for himself. Human nature is to him an open book, while to others it is a sealed book. They do not have the faculty of going back of pretensions. They are largely at the mercy of what he claims for himself, and they are always being duped. They make very poor employers. I know a popular businessman, a very able man in many respects, and one much beloved by everybody who knows him, but he has always been the victim of his ignorance of human nature. He cannot read motives, weigh or estimate the ability of others to do certain things. If an applicant for a position talks well, he immediately jumps to the conclusion that he is a good man for the position, and hires him, usually to be disappointed. He has a great weakness for clergymen who have lost their positions through failing health or for other reasons, and also for ex-teachers and professors. The result is that he has a lot of impractical people about him who know nothing of progressive scientific business building. It is an education in itself to form the habit of measuring, weighing, estimating the different people we meet, for in this way we are improving our own powers of observation, sharpening our perspective faculties, improving our judgment. The ability to read human nature is a cultivable quality, and we have a great opportunity in this country, with its conglomerate population, to study the various types of character. What a wonderful school most of us are in, practically all of the time, especially in large cities, where we are constantly coming in contact with strangers. What a chance to become experts in reading human nature, in studying motives, the face, the eye, the manners, the gestures, the walk. All these are hieroglyphics which, if we can only decipher them, spell out the character. Sometimes a single glance of the eye, when one is unconscious, will give you a glimpse into his innermost soul and reveal secrets which he would never dare to utter with his tongue. The facial expression and the manner, especially when people are off their guard or unconscious that they are being watched, are great revealers of character. You will find, as you become an expert in face study, in reading character, human nature, that you will develop marvelous skill in seeing things which you never noticed before. You will be able to protect yourself from the promoter, the insinuating man who is trying to persuade you into something which may not be to your benefit, but which will be to his. You will be able to discriminate between friendship and duplicity. You will be able to protect yourself from 1,000 annoyances and embarrassments and humiliations which might cripple your career. How many people are living in poverty, are wretched, homeless today because they could not read human nature and were robbed of their property and their rights? To discern the difference between the false and the true, to place the right values upon men, to emphasize the right thing in them, to discriminate between the genuine and the pretended, is an accomplishment which may be worth infinitely more to you than a college education without this practical power, and may make all the difference to you between success and failure, happiness and misery. Chapter 15. Does the world owe you a living? A 15-year-old bellboy was arrested in Cleveland for stealing $8. When asked in court why he stole, he said, "Because the world owes me a living." No doubt the youth had heard this many times from older lips. When the armies of Louis XIV were devastated in Flanders, the monarch exclaimed, "Has God forgotten all that I have done for him?" A vast number of people seem to think that God and the world are under great obligations to them, and that the world owes them a living without any return service from them. Not long ago, I heard a young woman say that she did not consider that she owed the world anything, that she was thrust into it without being consulted, that she proposed to get out of it what she could with as little effort as possible, and that she did not feel under the slightest obligation to the past. Did you ever think, my idle friend, what you really owe the world for the privilege of living in it? Did you ever think that all the civilizations of the globe have been working for you through all the ages up to the present moment, and that you are reaping the harvest of all the hard-working, sacrificing, suffering, drudging sowers that have preceded you? Can you look the workers of the world in the face and tell them that you intend to have all the benefits of their labor, to enjoy all the good things of the world without doing anything to compensate for them? The man who does not feel his heart throb with gratitude every day of his life for being born in the very golden age of the world, and who does not feel that he owes a tremendous debt to the past, to all the people who have struggled and striven and sacrificed before him, is not made of the right kind of stuff. In other words, he is not a man, and he ought to be treated as a drone, a thief of other men's labors. Everything that has gone before you enters into your life and time. You enjoy the sum of all the past every moment of your life. Think of the untold thousands who have laid down their lives to make possible the comforts, the blessings, and the immunities you now enjoy. Think of the rivers of blood that have been spilt, of the thousands who have perished or lived in the misery of prison and dungeon to purchase the liberties of speech and freedom of action which you enjoy today. How many lives have been lived in solitude and misery in order to develop sciences which are today beacon lights of the world? And think what multitudes of people are engaged in producing, manufacturing, and forwarding your clothing, your furniture, your food, the tropical fruits on your table, the foreign textiles, the bric-a-brac, and all the things which come from foreign lands to minister to your comfort and convenience. You buy an orange on the street for 2 or 3 cents, but did you ever think of what it has cost to bring it to you? Did you ever think of the number of people who have aided in its production and its transportation so that you might buy it for a few pennies? You get a yard of cotton cloth for 10 cents. But did you ever think of the toil and the hardships of the poor people in the South, of the operatives in the mill, the packers, shippers, and clerks who have handled and rehandled and shipped it by steamship and railroad that you might buy it for a song? Suppose these people who say that they owe the world nothing were obliged to make all the comforts and luxuries they enjoy. How long would it take them to produce even a lead pencil, a sheet of writing paper, a jackknife, a pair of spectacles, a pair of shoes, or a suit of clothes, representing an untold amount of drudgery and sacrifice? There is toil, struggle, and sacrifice in everything you purchase, everything you enjoy. How many thousands of people have worked like slaves to make it even possible for you to ride on a railroad or on a steamship, and how many lives have been sacrificed in order to reach the perfection and safety attained by modem trains and steamers, and to enable you to enjoy the comforts and luxuries which they provide? Wherever you go, tens of thousands of people have been preparing the way and getting things ready, guarding against danger, saving you trouble and drudgery. And yet you say that you do not consider yourself in debt to the world. If all the workers and all the wealth of the world today had been employed for thousands of years for your special benefit, to prepare for your reception upon the earth, they could not have provided the comforts, the conveniences, the facilities, the immunities, the luxuries which you found waiting for you when you were born, and for which you gave not even a penny or a thought, and yet you say that the world owes you this and the other, and that you owe it nothing. Did you ever think, my idle friend, that there are some things which are not purchasable with money? Do not deceive yourself by thinking that you will get something for nothing. All the laws of the universe are fighting such a theory. You must open an account with the world personally. No one else can pay the debt you owe. Whatever money or advantages your father or anyone else gets by his own efforts, nature has stamped untransferable. The law of the universe recognizes only one legal tender, and that is personal service. Whatever you get of real value you must pay for. The things that are done for you are delusions. You are a personal debtor to the world. When you were born, civilization opened an account with you. On one side of the ledger you find John Smith, debtor to all the past ages, for the sum total of the results of the toil of the men and the women who have lived and toiled before him. Debtor to the privations, the sufferings, and the sacrifices of those who have bought freedom from bondage, immunity from slavery, emancipation from drudgery. You are debtor to all the inventions that have ameliorated the hard conditions of mankind, and which have emancipated you from the same hard drudgery and stern conditions, the same narrow, limited life of your prehistoric ancestors. Who are you, Mr. Idler, that you claim a living from the world when you have not earned the clothing you have on your back or the shelter which covers your head? Why should tens of thousands of people drudge and endure hardships and privations to produce all of the useful things, the beautiful things, the luxuries for you to enjoy without effort? You say the world owes you a living. What if the sheep should refuse to furnish its wool to cover your lazy back, the earth refuse to produce the crops to fill your lazy stomach, the army of laborers refuse to let you take all the good things out of the world's great granary without putting anything back? What would become of you, who have never lifted your finger to learn a trade or to prepare yourself for a career, or to do work of any kind, if an edict were to come from the skies that would force you henceforth to do your share of the world's work or starve? Is he not a thief, an enemy of civilization, who thrusts his arm into the great world's storehouse, pulling out all the good things he wishes and refusing to put anything back in exchange? We hear a great deal about indiscriminate giving making paupers. But what shall we say about the giving of fortunes to youth who have never been taught that they should give anything in return for all they receive? What are the chances of growth in character, in sturdy manhood, for the boy who knows that a fortune is waiting for him when he is 21, and who is told every day that his father is rich and that he is a fool to work, that he should just make a business of having a good time? What are the chances of his developing a rugged, sturdy independence, resourcefulness, originality, inventiveness, and all the other qualities that make for vigorous manhood? It is cruel, little less than criminal, to leave vast fortunes to youth without stamina of character, a superb, practical training, or the experience or wisdom to use them wisely. Things are so arranged in this world that happiness as a profession must ever be a failure. It cannot be found by seeking. It is reflex action. It is incidental, a product which comes from doing noble things. It is impossible for a person to be really happy by making pleasure a profession. No idle life can produce a real man. A life of luxury calls out only the effeminate, destructive qualities. The creative forces are developed only by STEM endeavor to better one's condition in the world. No wealth or efforts of the parents can bring the latent energies out in the son which make for sturdy manhood. He must work out his problem himself. It can never be done for him. How little Harry Thaw's parents realized the cruelty of bringing their son up in idleness, without a trade or a profession, helpless to earn his own living in case of necessity. One would think they would have learned wisdom from the tens of thousands of lessons which ruined lives have taught, that there is no getting around God's fiat, no evading the law, that work, exercise of faculty, self-effort are the only things that will develop a real man. The Creator has put an enormous penalty upon idleness, the penalty of weakness, of deterioration, of destruction, of annihilation. Use or lose is nature's edict. The idle man is like an idle machine. It destroys itself very quickly. A score of enemies are in readiness to attack anything as soon as it is at rest. Rust, decay, and all sorts of disintegrating processes start in a man just as soon as he becomes idle. Self-destruction begins in the mind the moment it ceases to work. There is no power in heaven or on earth that can save an idle brain from deterioration, no power that can make a man strong and vigorous unless he obeys the natural laws of his life, written in his very constitution. Work, steady, persistent, with a purpose, with zeal, with enthusiasm, with a love for it, is the only thing that can save a man from the disgrace of being a nobody. Work is the inexorable law of growth. There is no getting away from it. The time will come when an able-bodied man who has the audacity, the presumption, to try to get all the good things out of the world and give nothing in return will be looked upon as a monstrosity, an enemy to civilization, and will be ostracized by all decent people. The youth who thinks he is going to go through this world on what somebody else has produced or done and still develop into the highest type of a man is attempting to fight against his maker. The very laws of the universe have made it forever impossible. Leave this vast, living, complicated machine idle, if you will. Try to divert it to some other use. Try to make a pleasure machine out of it when it was intended for a work machine. But all nature protests. One of the most demoralizing features of our American civilization today is found in the influence of the idle rich, great human drones who refuse to work, but who demand the best products of other men's labor and brains. I have heard rich fathers boast that necessity was the spur which made men of them, which gave them the foresight, the stamina, the shrewdness, the creative power, the ability necessary to make and protect their fortune. And yet they turn right around and leave a fortune to a son, which is likely to take away his energy, to take the spring out of his ambition, to rob him of the zest, the enthusiasm which can only come from the exercise of earnest, honest effort. No man is so rich, no matter how honestly he got his money, as to be able to confer immunity from work upon his offspring. The very nature of things, the eternal law of the universe, has made it forever impossible for you to transfer the stamina, the vigorous manhood, the stability, the character, everything that is of real value which you have gained in your struggle to get on in the world, to your son or daughter. Your offspring owes a debt to civilization which goes back of the parent. It is a debt which can only be wiped out by the individual. It cannot be discharged by proxy. Personal effort is the condition of the child's development. It is the inevitable price of manhood. No, there are some things you rich fathers cannot do for your boy. There is a law of nature which prohibits it, an omnipotent principle which protests against it. If a phrenologist should examine the heads of the idle, grown-up sons of rich men, he would find very marked deficiencies, an underdevelopment of nearly all of the qualities which make strong men. He would usually find selfishness very largely developed, self-reliance, originality, inventiveness, resourcefulness, and all the other qualities which are drawn out and strengthened only by self-help and the struggle to make one's way in the world, little developed. If he should compare them with the heads of their self-made fathers, he would find very marked inferiority, so marked that there would apparently be no relationship between the owners of the heads. The contrast would be as great as that between the hard, tough, firm fiber of the mountain oak and the fiber of the soft, spongy sapling which never struggled with the storm and tempest because sheltered by surrounding trees. How little a father realizes that it is one of the crudest things he could do to his boy to practically rob him of the opportunity of making a real man of himself, of developing qualities which make strength, power, which build vigorous, stalwart manhood. There is something about the actual making of one's way in the world, of burning behind one all bridges which others have built, throwing away all crutches and refusing to lean, to be boosted, refusing all assistance and standing erect upon one's own feet, thinking his own thoughts, fighting his own battles, bringing out his own latent possibilities by actual exercise, bringing into action every bit of one's inventiveness, resourcefulness, ingenuity and originality, tact that makes a man strong, vigorous, and stalwart, which indicates that this is the normal life of a man, the only life which can develop the true man. The army of inefficients, the namby-pambies, the dressed-up nobodies with soft hands and softer heads, who are expert only in saying silly nothings to silly women, or in the practice of some useless fad, the amount to nothings everywhere, ought to convince you that there is no way of getting something for nothing. If you will not do a man's work, if you will not pay a man's price for manhood, you will be only an apology for a man. Of course, you can live the life of the idle if you will. If you are the son of a foolish rich father, no one may be able to hinder you. But you must take the idler's reward. You must go through life branded with the shame, labeled with the weakness, marked with the deformities of idleness. You must pay the penalty of your choice and be a nobody. Chapter 16. What has luck done for you? Fortune brings in some boats that are not steered. People may say what they will about there not being any such thing as luck or chance, but we must all admit there is such a thing. We must all concede that things over which a man has no control, unforeseen happenings or events with which he has had nothing to do and on which he had not calculated, often change the whole course of his career. Good positions do not always come by merit, or as the result of one's own direct efforts. It is now a poor laboring man or washerwoman who falls heir to a fortune by the death of some relative. Or, again, it is a poor girl who is suddenly raised to wealth and what the world calls high position by marrying a man of rank or fortune. Every schoolboy knows that there is a great advantage in being in the right place in just the nick of time, and that being there is often a matter of chance. Men are constantly being moved up into positions which they did not get wholly by merit. Their elevation is due, perhaps, to a railroad accident, a stroke of paralysis, or the death of men in high places. We had a striking instance of this recently, in the death of 2 presidents of the Long Island Railroad within a few months, which led to unexpected promotions. Everyone knows that men are constantly being put at the head of large concerns because of kinship with the owners of the business, when perhaps a score of those who are working in the establishments at the time are much better fitted to fill the positions. But after all, who will be foolish enough to say that man is the toy of chance, or that true success is the result of accident or fate? No, luck is not God's price for success, nor does he dicker with men. When we consider the few who owe fortune or position to accident or luck, in comparison with the masses who have to fight every inch of the way to their own loaves, what are they in reality but the exceptions to the rule that character, merit, not fate or luck or any other bogey of the imagination, controls the destinies of men? The only luck that plays any great part in a man's life is that which inheres in a stout heart, a willing hand, and an alert brain. What has chance ever done in the world? Has it invented a telegraph or telephone? Has it laid an ocean cable? Has it built steamships, or established universities, asylums, or hospitals? Has it tunneled mountains, built bridges, or brought miracles out of the soil? What did luck have to do with making the career of Washington, of Lincoln, of Daniel Webster, of Henry Clay, of Grant, of Garfield, or of Elihu Root? Did it help Edison or Marconi with his inventions? Did it have anything to do with the making of the fortunes of our great merchant princes? Do such men as John Wanamaker, Robert Ogden, or Marshall Field owe their success to luck? Many a man has tried to justify his failure on the ground that he was doomed by the cards which fate dealt him, that he must pick them up and play the game, and that no effort, however great on his part, could materially change the result. But, my young friend, the fate that deals your cards is in the main your own resolution. The result of the game does not rest with fate or destiny, but with you. You will take the trick if you have the superior energy, ability, and determination requisite to take it. You have the power within yourself to change the value of the cards which, you say, fate has dealt you. The game depends upon your training, upon the way you are disciplined to seize and use your opportunities, and upon your ability to put grit in the place of superior advantages. Just because circumstances sometimes give clients to lawyers and patients to physicians, put commonplace clergymen in uncommon pulpits, and place the sons of the rich at the head of great corporations, even when they have only average ability and scarcely any experience, while poor youths with greater ability and more experience often have to fight their way for years to obtain ordinary situations. Are you justified in starting out without a chart, or in leaving a place for luck in your program? What would you think of a captain of a great liner who would start out to sea without any port in view and trust to luck to land his precious cargo safely? Did you ever know of a strong young man making out his life program and depending upon chance to carry out any part of it? Men who depend upon luck do not think it worthwhile to make a thorough preparation for success. They are not willing to pay the regular price for it. They are looking for bargains. They are hunting for shortcuts to success. We hear a great deal about Roosevelt's luck, but what would it have availed him if he was not ready for the opportunity when it came, if he had not trained himself through years of persistent drill to grasp it, if he had not been prepared to make the best use of it? I have never known a man to amount to much until he cut out of his vocabulary such words as good luck and bad luck, and from his life maxims all the I can't words and the I can't philosophy. There is no word in the English language more misused and abused than luck. More people have excused themselves for poor work and mean, stingy, poverty-stricken careers by saying luck was against them than by any other plea. That door ahead of you, young man, is probably closed because you have closed it by lack of training, by a lack of ambition, energy, and push. While perhaps you have been waiting for luck to open it, a pluckier, grittier fellow has stepped in ahead of you and opened it himself. Power gravitates to the man who knows how. Luck is the tide, nothing more. The strong man rows with it if it makes toward his port. He rows against it if it flows the other way. When Governor John A. Johnson of Minnesota was asked, "How do you account for your success?" he answered simply, "I just tried to make good." You will find 999 times out of 1,000 that the man who tries to make good is the lucky man. Young Johnson had to fight against poverty, heredity, and environment, everything that could be put forward as an excuse for bad luck or no chance. Yet in his hard battle with fate, he never once faltered or whined or complained that luck was against him. One of the most unfortunate delusions that ever found its way into a youth's brain is that there is some force or power outside of himself that will, in some mysterious way, and with very little effort on his part, lift him into a position of comfort and luxury. I never knew anyone who followed the ignis fatuus, luck, who did not follow it to his ruin. Good luck follows good sense, good judgment, good health, a gritty determination, a lofty ambition, and downright hard work. When you see horses in a race, you know perfectly well that the one in the lead is ahead because he has run faster than the others, and you would not have much sympathy for the horse behind if he should bemoan his fate and declare that the horse ahead had a snap. When you see anyone doing better than you are doing under similar circumstances, just say to yourself, "There must be some reason for it. There is a secret back of it, and I must find it out." Do not try to ease your conscience or lull your ambition by pleading hard luck for yourself or good fortune for another. Napoleon said that God is always on the side of the strongest battalions. He is always on the side of the best prepared, the best trained, the most vigilant, the pluckiest, and the most determined. If we should examine the career of most men who are called lucky, we should find that their success has its roots far back in the past and has drawn its nourishment from many a battle in the struggle for supremacy over poverty and opposition. We should probably find that the lucky man is a closer thinker than the unlucky man, that he has a finer judgment, that he has more system and order, that his brain acts more definitely and concisely, that he thinks more logically, more vigorously, and that he is more practical. Life is not a game of chance. The Creator did not put us where we would be the sport of circumstances, to be tossed about by a cruel fate, regardless of our own efforts. Chapter 17. Success with a Flaw. Just now, the American people are receiving some painful lessons in practical ethics, said President Nicholas Murray Butler recently. They are having brought home to them, with severe emphasis, the distinction between character and reputation. Of late, we have been watching reputations melt away like snow before the sun. Put bluntly, the situation which confronts the American people today is due to the lack of moral principle. Never before in the history of our country have the American people received a greater shock to their faith in human nature than during the past year, by the exposure of the diabolical methods practiced by men in high places upon an admiring and unsuspecting people. Every little while the public press throws X-rays upon the characters of men who have long stood high and spotless in the public eye, and have been looked up to as models of manhood, men of honorable achievement, revealing great ugly stains of dishonor, which, like the blood spot on Lady Macbeth's hands, all the oceans of the globe cannot wash out. A tiny flaw sometimes cuts the value of an otherwise $1,000 diamond down to $50 or less. The defect is not noticeable to the average person. It is only the fatal magnifying glass that will detect it, and yet its presence is a perpetual menace to the commercial value of the stone. A great many human diamonds which, a little while ago, were thought to be flawless brilliants of the first water, and which dazzled the financial and social world, when the microscope of official scrutiny was turned upon them, were found to contain great ugly flaws. A United States senator, 70 years of age, was recently sentenced to serve a term in prison, besides paying a fine, for his connection with great land frauds. Still, another senator and several representatives have been indicted for crooked work in connection with their exalted positions. Congressmen have been convicted of land frauds and army officers of peculation. The exposure of post office contracts and the notorious cotton statistics leak not long ago showed that minor officials had sold themselves to manufacturers and Wall Street brokers. Think of the men at the head of great public trusts juggling with sacred funds, not only taking for themselves, from the hard-earned savings of the poor, salaries 2 or 3 times as great as that of the President of the United States, but also giving enormous salaries to a large number of their relatives out of these same sacred funds of those who have struggled for years to make possible a better condition for those who should survive them. Think of their paying out hundreds of thousands of dollars for secret services of a suspicious nature and using trust funds to effect stock manipulations for private gain. Was there ever before such a shameful story spread before Americans? Were people ever before so mercilessly betrayed by men they looked up to, admired, and implicitly trusted? Never before has there been such colossal stealing carried on so brazenly and openly by men in high positions. Some of these men, when they appeared in public a year ago, were applauded to the echo. Wherever they went, they were followed by admiring crowds. Some months ago I saw one of them, a man who has been for many years a great public favorite, at a reception in the White House. He was pointed out by guests and seemed to attract almost as much attention as the president himself. People seemed to regard it as a great honor to be introduced to him. Now he would hardly dare to appear before an audience for fear of being hissed. What a humiliation for those whose names have been household words for a quarter of a century or more, to be asked to withdraw from trusteeships or directorships in institutions which perhaps worked for years to secure these men on account of their great influence and high reputations. What is there left worth living for when a man has lost the finest, the most sacred thing in him, and when he has forfeited the confidence and respect of his fellow men? Is there any quality which inheres in dollars that can compensate for such a loss? Is there anything which ought to be held more precious than honor or more sacred than the esteem and confidence of friends and acquaintances? The man who has nothing which he holds dearer than money or some material advantage is not a man. The brute has not been educated out of him. The abler a man, and the more money he has, the more we despise him if he has gotten that money dishonestly, because of the tremendous contrast between what he has done and what he might have done. what the world demands of you, whatever your career, whether you make money or lose it, whether you are rich or poor, is that you be a man. It is the man that gives value to achievement. You cannot afford success with a flaw in it. You cannot afford to have people say of you, Mr. Blank has made money, but there is a stain on it. It is smirched. It has cost him too much. He exchanged his manhood for it. Every human being has it within his power to keep the foundation under him, his manhood, absolutely secure under all circumstances. Nothing can shake that but himself. The citadel can never be taken until he himself surrenders the keys. Calumny, detraction, slander, or monetary failure cannot touch this sacred thing. Every man, whether in private or public life, should so carry himself before the world that he will show in his very face and manner that there is something within him not for sale, something so sacred that he would regard the slightest attempt to debauch it as an unpardonable insult. He should so carry himself that no one would even dare to suggest that he could be bought or bribed. Who was so corrupt during the Civil War that he would have dared to attempt to bribe Abraham Lincoln? There was something in that face that would have cowed the hardest character. Who would be bold enough to presume to bribe our present president? Many a one has failed because he was not a man before he was a merchant or a lawyer or a manufacturer or a statesman, because character was not the dominating influence in his life. If you are not a man first, if there is not a man behind your book, behind your sermon, behind your law brief, or your business transaction, if you are not larger than the money you make, the world will expose and despise your pretense and discount your success. History will cover up your memory no matter how much money you may leave. That is the lesson of the startling disclosures of late. These men whose reputations have melted away so rapidly, men who have had such a drop in the public regard, were not real men to start with. There were flaws in their character foundations, and the superstructures of their achievement have fallen before the flood of public indignation. Those criminals in high places are beginning to realize that no smartness, brilliancy, genius, scheming, long-headed cunning, bluffing, or pretense can take the place of manhood or be a substitute for personal integrity. There are men in New York today whose names have been a power, who would give every dollar they have for a clean record, if they could wipe off all their underhanded, questionable methods from the slate and start anew. But there is no way to buy a good name. It is above riches and beyond the price of rubies. How many men there are today in high positions who are in perpetual terror lest something should happen to expose the real facts of their lives, something which would pierce their masks and reveal them in their true light. How must a man feel who is conscious that he is walking all the time on the thin crust of a volcano, which is liable to open at any moment and swallow him? There is one thing no money or influence can buy. That is, the heart's approval of a wrong deed or a questionable transaction. It will be bobbing up all along the future to remind you of your theft, of your dishonesty, or of your unfair advantage. It will take the edge off your enjoyment. It will appear, like Banquo's ghost, at every feast to which you sit down. Methinks that some of the men who have been exposed recently must have had strange dreams and horrid nightmares during their sleep, when the ghosts of the poor people, whom they have wronged, appeared to them and haunted their rest. Methinks they must have had strange visions as these sacred dollars intended for widows and orphans slipped through their fingers for luxuries and amusements, dollars which had been wrung out of the lives of those who trusted them. What a pitiable picture those great financial giants made, under investigation in courts of inquiry, squirming, ducking, dodging, and resorting to all sorts of ingenuity to avoid telling the exact truth, to keep from uncovering their tracks or exposing their crooked methods. No man has a right to put himself in a position where he has to cover up anything or where he must be afraid of the truth. Every man should live so that he can hold up his head, look his kind in the face without wincing, and defy the world. A man went to President Roosevelt before the last presidential election and told him that someone had unearthed a letter of his which would be extremely damaging to his canvas were it made public, and that, with a little diplomacy, the damaging part of the letter could be suppressed. After listening to the man, the great president said, "I have never written a letter which I am afraid to have published. Let them print the letter, the whole of it. I have nothing to conceal. I am not afraid to face anything I have ever done." How many of our public men dare take that attitude? Isn't it a disgrace to this fair land that there are men in our Senate and House of Representatives and in almost every legislature whose votes and influence can be bought and upon whose honor there is a price? If there is anything which a man in a responsible position ought to prize, it is the esteem of the young men who look up to him as their idol or hero. Is it strange, when our youth find their idols smashed and their heroes betraying them, that their ideals should become blurred and twisted? Is it strange that they should ignore the old-fashioned methods of slow fortune-making when they see the smooth, oily, diplomatic schemers getting rich in a few months, and young men who were mere clerks a year ago now riding in costly automobiles, giving expensive entertainments, and living in fine houses? Why should they not catch the spirit and try to do the same thing themselves? You wrongdoers in high places, if you should live as long as Methuselah, should devote every minute of the balance of your lives to doing good, and should give every farthing of your wealth to charity, you could not repair the damage you have done in crushing the ideals of these tens of thousands of youths who have looked up to you as their models of successful men. How can you escape responsibility for the crookedness which may be repeated in their lives when they shall come to fill these high positions which you now hold? They thought that square dealing, honesty, and integrity had been the secrets of your success, and now they see that it was won by your smooth, oily, cunning dishonesty, your ability to deceive, to cover your tracks, and to live a double life. Who but yourselves will be responsible for the cracks in their characters which may come from the terrible shaking of their confidence in humanity? But young men, don't lose your faith in humanity. Don't let your fallen idols shake your faith in your fellow men, for the great majority of people are honest. Let these terrible examples that have recently been held up to you make you all the more determined to build your own superstructure on the eternal rock of right and justice. Let the man in you stand out so boldly in every transaction that the deed or task you do, however great, will look insignificant in comparison. Get what you can and keep your own good name, not a penny more. $1 more than that would make your whole fortune valueless. If there is a pitiable sight in the world, it is that of a man, with the executive ability, sagacity, and foresight to make a clean fortune, yet using his energies and abilities in making a dirty one, a fortune which denounces and condemns him and is a perpetual disgrace to himself and his family. The right ought to thunder so loudly in a man's ears, no matter what the business or transaction in which he is engaged, that he cannot hear the wrong or baser suggestion. Men have two kinds of ambition, one for dollar-making, the other for life-making. Some turn all their ability, education, health, and energy toward the first of these, dollar-making, and call the result success. Others turn them toward the second, into character, usefulness, helpfulness, life-making, and the world sometimes calls them failures, but history calls them successes. No price is too great to pay for an untarnished name. The highest service you can ever render the world, the greatest thing you can ever do, is to make yourself the largest, completest, and squarest man possible. There is no other fame like that, no achievement like that. Chapter 18. Getting Away from Poverty. Those who have the misfortune to be rich men's sons are heavily weighted in the race, says Andrew Carnegie. The vast majority of rich men's sons are unable to resist the temptations to which wealth subjects them, and they sink to unworthy lives. It is not from this class that the poor beginner has rivalry to fear. The partner's sons will never trouble you, the poor boys, much. But look out that some boys poorer, much poorer than yourselves, whose parents cannot afford to give them any schooling, Do not challenge you at the post and pass you at the grandstand. Look out for the boy who has to plunge into work directly from the common school and who begins by sweeping out the office. He is the probable dark horse that will take all the money and win all the applause. The struggle to get away from poverty has been a great man-developer. Had every human being been born with a silver spoon in his mouth, had there been no necessity put upon him to work, the race would still be in its infancy. Had everybody in this country been born wealthy, ours would be one of the dark ages. The vast resources of our land would still be undeveloped. The gold would still be in the mines, and our great cities would still be in the forest and the quarry. Civilization owes more to the perpetual struggle of man to get away from poverty than to anything else. We are so constituted that we make our greatest efforts and do our best work while struggling to attain that for which the heart longs. It is practically impossible for most people to make their utmost exertions without imperative necessity for it. It is the constant necessity to improve his condition that has urged man onward and developed the stamina and sterling character of the whole race. History abounds in stories of failures of men who started with wealth, and, on the other hand, it is illuminated with examples of those who owe everything to the spur of necessity. A glance at the history of our own country will show that the vast majority of our successful men in every field were poor boys at the start. Benjamin Franklin, Alexander Hamilton, Andrew Jackson, Henry Clay, Daniel Webster, Abraham Lincoln, Horace Mann, George Peabody, Ulysses S. Grant, James A. Garfield, to mention but a few of the great names of past generations, rose to distinction from an iron environment and direst poverty. Our most useful and successful men of today have also been evolved from the school of want and stern necessity. Our great merchants, railroad presidents, university presidents and professors, inventors, scientists, manufacturers, statesmen, men in every line of human activity, have, for the most part, been pushed forward by the goad of necessity and led onward by the desire to make the most of themselves. A youth, born and bred in the midst of luxury, who has always leaned upon others, who has never been obliged to fight his way up to his own loaf, and who has been coddled from his infancy, rarely develops great stamina or staying power. He is like the weak sapling in the forest compared with the giant oak, which has fought every inch of its way up from the acorn by struggling with storms and tempests. Power is the result of force overcome. The giant is made strong in wrestling with difficulties. It is impossible for one who does not have to struggle and to fight obstacles to develop fiber or stamina. To live without trial is to die but half a man. Strength of character is a thing which must be wrung out of obstacles overcome. Life is a great gymnasium, and no man who sits in a chair and watches the parallel bars and other apparatus ever develops muscles or endurance. A father, by exercising for his son while he sits down, will never develop his muscle. The son will be a weakling until he uses the dumbbells and pulley weights himself. How many fathers try to do the exercises for their boys while they sit on soft benches or easy chairs, watching the process, and still those fathers wonder that their boys come out of the gymnasium weak, with as soft and flabby muscles as they had when they entered. Isn't it strange that so many successful men who take pride in having made themselves and consider it the most fortunate thing in the world that they were thrown upon their own resources and were obliged to develop their independence and stamina and self-reliance, should work so hard to keep their children from having the same experience? Isn't it strange that they should provide crutches so that it will be all the more difficult for them to walk alone? That they should take away the strongest possible motive for the development of power by making it unnecessary for them to strive, by providing for every want and guarding them on all sides by wealth? A famous artist, who was asked if he thought a young man who was studying with him would make a great painter, replied, "No, never. He has an income of £6,000 a year." This artist knew how the great struggle against thwarting difficulties brings out power, and how hard it is to develop a strong, manly fiber in the sunshine of wealth. How many young immigrants have come to this country uneducated, ignorant of our language, friendless and penniless, and yet have risen to positions of distinction and wealth, putting to shame tens of thousands of native-born youths who possessed every advantage of wealth, education, and opportunity, but who have never been heard from. I have in mind a young man of this class who came to this country a comparatively short time ago, but who has already risen to a very important position wholly unaided. He is a remarkable example of a self-educated, self-trained, self-disciplined man, and, in the persistent process of his development, he has evolved a very strong, positive, aggressive character. He has brought out his latent powers and strengthened his weaker faculties. He has pruned out of his mentality and habits those things which would embarrass and hinder his progress, and has gained such a strong momentum that there seems to be scarcely any limits to what he is likely to become. His is an inspiring example of the possibilities of manhood in America, one which explodes all excuses of the poor boy and girl who think they have absolutely no chance to get up in the world. I am no advocate of the blessings of poverty, considered as a finality. Poverty is of no value except as a vantage ground for a starting point. It is only good, as is the apparatus in the gymnasium, to develop the man. In itself, it is a curse, slavery, but it is the great thing to get away from, and it is the getting away from it, if honestly and conscientiously done, that calls out the man, that develops the human giant. We did not always see at the time that what we got incidentally on the way up from poverty was infinitely better and more precious than the thing we were aiming for, a living, a competence, that the development of a strong man in the mighty struggle with necessity was 1,000 times more valuable than the living, the money, or the property gained. Grover Cleveland, who was once a poor clerk at a salary of $50 a year, in speaking of poverty as a developer, says, "There is surely no development of mental traits and no stimulation of the forces of true manhood so thorough and so imperiously effective as those produced by the combination of well-regulated ambition with the healthful rigors of poverty. It is the student who has to struggle hardest to obtain an education that gets the most discipline and good out of it. Boys who are born scholars, and who only need to read a lesson over to know it and to be able to pass an examination upon it, do not derive half so much from their college course as do those who have to fight hard for everything they get. It is not, as a rule, the youth who has a regular income and every want supplied by indulgent parents who makes the most of his opportunities at college, but the one who has to work his way through, who has to toil in college and out to make his expenses, or else go without an education. What would the average youth do if he were not compelled by necessity to work, if he were not obliged to exert himself in order to get the thing he wants? If he already has all he wants, why should he struggle for more? Not 1 in 10,000 would go through the struggle with poverty, the wrestling with necessity, just to produce character and make himself a stronger man, but he would do it for selfish reasons, to satisfy his ambition and get that which he longs for himself and those he loves. "I'm not wasting my sympathy on the children of the poor," says U.S. Senator J.P. Dolliver, once a poor boy himself. "What little sympathy I have, I will give to the children of the rich. If you have $100,000 and give it to a boy to start him out in life, he doesn't start. I suggest keeping that 100,000 and that boy apart. It will be better for the boy." The cabin where Abraham Lincoln was born did not shelter the childhood of a king, but something better than a king, a man. The boy who is conscious that he has a fortune awaiting him says to himself, "What is the use of getting up early in the morning and working one's life out? I have money enough coming to me to take care of me as long as I live." So he turns over and takes another nap, while the boy who has nothing in the world but his own self to depend upon feels the spur of necessity forcing him out of bed in the morning. He knows there is no other way open for him but the way of struggle. He has nobody to lean on, nobody to help him. He knows that it is a question either of being a nobody or getting up and hustling for dear life. Thus, shrewd nature, in making man get that which he wants most by the way of necessity, brings about her great ends of civilization and character development of the race. The money, the property, the position are small things in comparison with the man she is after. What price will nature not pay for a man? She will put him through the hardest school of discipline and train him for years in the great university of experience in order to perfect her work. The mere money or property the man gets on the way is only incidental. Nature is after the man. She does not care a fig for the money in comparison, but she will pay any price for a human giant. Thank you for listening to this audiobook. We hope you enjoyed your experience.